The first is whether the 5.56 is inadequate to be lethal. The dumbest argument from gunfight virgins is whether this round actually drops people instantly without any context. On one hand, the military doesn't have any official document or in any NATO army that says the caliber failed. Like, it failed so bad and so urgent that they need to pull them from the inventory. The U.S. Army looked at the close-range complaints in 2003 and called it perception without fact. Most of NATO expected to still be shooting it 10 years on, and they were. On the other side, the soldiers who carried it. An Army commander in 1965, watching enemy soldiers take several hits in the chest and keep moving. Marines during the Gulf War says they had to maybe put about 2 and 3 rounds into Iraqi soldiers before they stopped shooting back. Some reported the bullet just goes straight out the far side. From a data perspective, both camps are counting different things. The military averages millions of rounds into a report, so what it sees is a round that works. But the soldier only sees maybe a dozen men shot in his entire life. And some only remember bits and pieces, and some of them remember the ones that didn't go down, because nobody remembers the man who fell over like he was supposed to. Then add what the detailed research was saying, that this round was failing to do its job about a quarter of the time. One camp is answering whether it can kill. The other is answering whether it does it every time. Neither has ever been arguing the other's question. The next one is the claim that the green tip is a huge upgrade, and some think it's just a myth. So here's the deal: if this is the second week of you owning an AR-15, and you see all these debates online and you wonder why this is such a big deal. One camp buys green tips because it's got a hardened steel tip on the front, and it'll punch through a steel helmet several hundred meters away. The other camp says that steel tip is the problem because the weight sits up at the front and holds the bullet straight after it goes in, so it can travel 5 to 8 inches before it starts to turn sideways, and a man's chest is only about 8 to 10 inches front to back. Basically, they are saying it's almost like it's punching through before the tumbling effect does any damage. The split comes down to whoever read what the round was built for, and the guy only buys what the military has and what the marketing has made them believe that's the ammo to get regardless. The Marine Corps actually put it in writing in 2010 that green tips don't do what they need against men who are not wearing body armor. The next one is the most common one regarding if the military 5.56 is the same as 223, or if the military brass is a lot heavier or thicker so it can withstand more pressures. One camp says the brass for the military is built heavier so it can take more pressure. But the other camp believes there is no consistent pattern either way. The confusion here is that some people seem to believe is that the mil-spec brass is heavier wall to handle higher pressure. So in theory, it holds less powder, and you have to cut down the charge. Some of it came from associating the whole thing between the 7.62 and the 30-06, which the military one was in fact thicker. So if you narrow this down to one thing that a child can understand is that if you get it wrong by enough, it might blow up. So when a man tells you military brass is thicker than the civilian stuff and you better cut your charge, he is just telling you to be safe than sorry, but there is a bit more technical things to it. But as far as if you can shoot a 5.56 in a 2.23 chambered barrel, the general advice is that this is not safe. Just don't do it. People who still argue about this are just wasting their time. Of course, you can still fire a 5.56 in a 223 chamber, but firing repeatedly on high volume is probably going to fudge up your barrel and other parts eventually. The next debate is all about the barrel length the bullet is coming out of, because some believe the short barrel is the cause of some lack of lethality issues. One camp says barrel length barely matters, and the other disagree. When they went from 20 inches to 14.5 cost about 50 meters of range. The science behind it is that the round kills by coming apart like this, and it only does that above about 2,700 feet a second or faster. Below that, it just drills through. With that being said, the range where the bullet comes apart is also something to consider. It's the per inch math you got to think about. So you are losing about 25 to 30 feet a second per inch of barrel. So a 20 inch starts around 3,200, a 10.5 starts around roughly 2,750, so it's right under before the bullet has gone past 50 yards. So to make this painfully simple, one camp asks whether a soldier can hit a man at 300 meters, it's all about accuracy, and the other asks what happens after he hits him, and how many rounds does it take to drop an enemy assuming every shot hits. The fourth debate is that some people ask if a heavy grain hollow points is a bad idea for home defense. One camp loads a heavy match bullet, thinks more weight means more knockdown power. The hole in the tip isn't there to make the bullet open up. So it's left over from how the bullet gets made because the jacket is drawn from the base forward and it never quite closes at the front. Building it that way makes it fly straight. It does not make it come apart. When we say coming apart, it just means this. The other camp loads the cheapest 55 grain ball ammo from the store. Indoors, both of them will kill a man. Across a bedroom, any rifle round does that. So what the bullet does to the person you shot isn't what decides this. What decides it is what the bullet does after it's gone through him. It goes into the wall behind him, then the wall behind that one. And if it's still in one piece when it comes out the far side, it can still kill somebody you can't see. So that's the whole thing they are talking about. Cheap target ball ammo like this comes apart on almost anything it touches, and everybody who complains about that is describing the exact behavior you want in a house. The heavy bullet holds together longer. Shoot one into gelatin next to plain ball, and it takes noticeably more distance before it starts breaking up. So it's carrying more weight, and it's slower to break, and both of those point at your neighbor's bedroom inside an apartment if you're not careful. So what's the context of anybody using a heavy bullet? So police load a bullet built to hold together on purpose because out on the road, they needed to punch a windshield if they had to, or a car door. Police solved the indoor side of this too, and almost nobody buys that solution because it's a bonded round, which just means the lead core is welded to the copper jacket so the bullet can't shed pieces. It opens up on a man like a hunting bullet, it still gets through glass, and it doesn't sail through drywall forever. It's also hard to find on the civilian side, usually out of stock, and expensive enough that most people go back to whichever cheap box they already trusted. And nobody in this argument has actually shot any drywall. Both sides are working from how the bullet is built, not from anything anybody measured. The next one is all about this heavy 77 grain, match-grade ammo that some Spec Ops teams use. They call it the Mark II 62. One camp treats 77 grain as the obvious step up, and most of what they say is true. It holds its speed better, shoots flatter, and stays fast enough to work out to a lot more distance. The other camp says the hole in the tip isn't a hollow point. It's where the jacket didn't close because they build the bullet backward to make it accurate. And when the Army's wound lab tested a match bullet in the 80s, it tore up about as much tissue as a plain bullet. Which side you end up on depends on what you can check yourself. Almost nobody owns a block of gelatin. Everybody owns a paper target. So the only test a normal guy can run is group size. And the heavy bullet wins that every time. And for some weekend plinkers, this is just a waste of money and time if all they shoot is paper within 50 yards. The next debate follows up the first one regarding if the military purposely wanted a round designed to wound instead of instant kill. One camp thinks the round was picked to wound men instead of killing them. The idea is that a dead man costs the enemy 1 soldier, and a wounded man costs him 3 trying to fix him, and all the psychological pain that comes with it, which it was a thing back in the day, because 2 more have to stop shooting and carry him out. So do you think shrink an attacking force is faster by not killing anybody in a war? Also, do you think the enemy also thinks the same way when they have the chance to shoot back? The problem is that it only works if the other side comes back for its wounded. Somebody has to leave the fight and drag him. If nobody comes, he just lies there, and you've taken 1 man out instead of 3. The enemy this round was adopted to fight, didn't come for him. North Vietnamese and Viet Cong units kept shooting until the fight was over and collected their dead afterward, if at all. So the strategy has nobody to work on. There's a simpler check, too. Every rifle cartridge ever issued was built to kill a man. The things actually designed to wound are beanbag rounds and rubber buckshot, and nobody has ever mixed those up with a rifle. What the round was really built for is weight. A 7.62 cartridge weighs about twice what a 5.56 does, so the same load on a man's back as 100 rounds of the old one, or better than 200 of the new one. That was the trade. More bullets, not gentler ones. The myth survives because of who hands it to you. Most guys hear it first from a drill instructor or a veteran, which is about the most trusted voice a young shooter has, and it sounds like something you'd only know from the inside. Back in the day, the Vietnamese deliberately set out to wound Americans rather than kill them, using booby traps and punji stakes. And they did it because Americans stopped everything to carry a wounded man out. So they took advantage of that. 1 hurt soldier meant less and less combat effective. Somebody who lived through that may still think modern enemies are still doing the same thing. And not every Army guy is a ballistic expert, and not everyone is into guns as much as a civilian gun nuts on the internet. Maybe, maybe not. War is never pretty. Anyone who wishes for that is a crazy person that you should stay away from. The next myth is whether the bigger the cavity in the gel means the deadlier the round for the 5.56. One camp often points at the big cavity that opens up in the slow motion footage and think that's how far it stretched is how hard the round hit. The second group of people think it doesn't count because an average human target isn't that thick. Here's what's actually happening inside that gel block if you ever wonder what these ballistic nerds are doing. Gelatin behaves two different ways depending on how hard you push it. If you push it a little and it stretches and snaps right back where it started, it's the same way a rubber band does. But if you push it past what it can take and it tears and stays torn. A rifle bullet does both at the same time. So the huge bloom you often see in the slow-mo clip is the first one. The gel stretching and then springing right back. The narrow line running down the middle is the part that tore and stayed torn. That stretch can do real harm depending on what it's stretching, and it's ugly on a vital organ. In a ballistic gel test, all you are looking for is penetration depth, bullet expansion, and the size of the damaged channel to see how well a round performs in soft tissue. Experts usually look for a depth of 12 to 18 inches. Too shallow means it may not reach vital organs. Too deep means it might just pass through. And then the total area of displacement shows the destructive path of the projectile. Also, how much the fired bullet weighs compared to its original weight. Higher retention means the bullet stayed together and delivered solid energy. There are more to this that are way too technical to cover in this video, and most of it will bore 99% of the audience out there, but there are plenty of other channels you can watch to get that info. If you like this so far, you may enjoy these too.